Welcome, everybody, to Cares Everywhere. It's me, Anthony Brown, a.k.a. the Ghetto Practitioner. Man, I'm super excited today. I woke up this morning I didn't come to, and I think that's some of the most important things to recognize when you're in recovery and doing life on life terms. And speaking of recovery and doing life on life terms, boy, do I have a treat for you today. I am super excited. I'm just ecstatic. I can't even think of the proper adjective to throw to this one this morning. Man, they say if I had a tail, I would be wagging it. And so, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to a person who I met along my travels. She volunteered to come here and share her experience, strength, and hope, a story of faith, transformation, and quite a few, yes, folks, not just a couple, but quite a few years of sobriety. Let's bring in our guest today, Miss Jessie Coleman. Hi, Jessie.
Hi there, Anthony. It's really nice to see you. My name is Jessie C. I have a clean sobriety date of August 22nd, 2006. For that day, I am truly grateful. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, thank you for having me. And this is the first time you've been with the Ghetto Practitioner, and we're just going to do what we do. We're going to trust God and just let it flow. And what's really fascinating, you said something that's impactful right out the gate. I want you to elaborate a little bit. You said clean sobriety. Now, what's the difference? People, I'm good with questions. No, I like questions. Actually, I talk a lot. But one day somebody asked me, what's the difference between being clean and being sober? Is there a difference in there? You mentioned clean.
Uh, it's only the only difference is clean is Narcotics Anonymous and sober is Alcoholics Anonymous. And I do both programs. And so I use the clean and sober. So I appeal to all people. Some people separate themselves from Alcoholics Anonymous because they seem to have never had a problem with alcohol. And it was just drugs,
Mm-hmm.
And so I do clean and sober so I can relate to more people.
Okay.
Because alcohol and anything else that could change the way my brain thought, I dove into. I tried many different things. I
Well,
had two favorite things though, and that was alcohol and methamphetamine. So I qualify for both programs.
okay. Let's dive into that pool of madness. You say you've been sober 19 and a half years, clean and sober, 19 and
Yes.
a half years. You're doing AA and NA, and there's, to be able to reach out to a broad spectrum of people, it's beneficial to acknowledge being both, because I too am an alcoholic that did drugs alcoholically, you know,
Yes.
and I love all the fellowships. I glean from everywhere, and because I was just deep into my insanity. And speaking of deep into insanity, can you share with our audience what is like the or what was your insanity like?
What was my insanity like?
Yeah, what made you come to both fellowships?
Well, I joined Narcotics Anonymous about 2 years ago. Majority of my journey has been in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I what brought me here?
Yeah.
Well, let's see. I had a very sordid childhood, and I grew up in an alcoholic, dysfunctional family. Throughout my life, I've been told it was because of the blood that runs through my veins. I'm half Native American and half Irish, and I was destined to be alcoholic at the very least. So society says,
Ah.
you know.
Okay.
What I've come to find out all the debacles that I had were because I was alcoholic. And what I mean by that is that once I put alcohol in my system, all systems go. And it didn't matter what it was, I needed to shut my brain down. And so let's see what it was like. As a child, my mother was an active alcoholic and she abandoned us multiple times. I'm the youngest of 9 children, and my oldest sister would always grab me and take care of me while my mother was off on her debacles.
Right.
But my next oldest brother and sister would be put into the system. And I would be with my mother's first family. She was married twice at this point, and let's see, 9. 6 of my brothers and sisters were from her first marriage, and us last 3 were from her second marriage. And so, yeah, so what I came to find out through doing the steps is that I had a lot of survivor's guilt for being loved by my family and my brothers and my brother and sister being put through the system. I don't know. It started for me very young. With all of the abandonment and the taken into this house and that, and then my mother coming back and all of this stuff in different schools. I stole from one of my older sisters my very first bag of weed off the pool table in the garage. And she was an older sister. God bless her soul. She's passed now. But yeah. And so I ran to my next oldest sister and I'm like, look at what I got. What do we do with it? And back then they called it uh, fingers, and it was like 4 fingers of weed. And we didn't know what to do with it. So we went to a neighbor, and well, they knew what to do with it. And it started. I was in like 4th grade at that point, maybe 5th grade. And alcohol came in right that same day. And I thought I found a way out of my brain. By 15, I was pregnant. And I had my first boy. And that was a really dysfunctional relationship. That guy was violent, and I left him by the time my son was about 1.5 years old. So I was out on my own, and having had grown up in a ghetto, I grew up in Wilmington, California, and it was a pretty gang-ridden ghetto. And so one of my sayings is you could take the girl out of the ghetto, but you can't really get the ghetto out of the girl. And I ran rickshaw through so many people's lives for so many years. I was dead set not to be on welfare. So, and back in the 80s, the early 80s, you didn't need to have a high education to get a good job. You just, it was a different world back then. And so I, became a dental assistant at age 16. I was trained on the job, and I took the tests, and got my registration and my x-ray license and blah, 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 coronal polishing, and worked in the dental field for about 8 years. 9 years. And the thought came, and I was drunk and taking cross stops every day, cocaine, anything that could come my way. But I would show up to work, and lunchtime, me me and the dental assistant would go buy a slice of pizza and a 6-pack of beer, and we'd down the beer and eat the pizza and go back into the office, and that went on for years. One day I woke up and I'm like, I don't want to stare down throats anymore.
Mm.
And I quit, you know? And I'm like, well, by that time I had been managing the office and doing all the insurance billing and the scheduling and chairside assisting. So I'm like, well, I have all these skills, what can I cross them into? And so, I had several other little jobs between dental assisting and my getting sober the first time. When I turned 18, I received a large sum of money from a trust from my Indian reservation, and it was on and cracking. It was, we had kegers. I would pick up kegers on my way home from work, and I was still a dental assistant at this point. Um, and kegers and bands in the backyard every Friday would go all the way till Sunday, and I had this little baby that was 2 years old, and it was just all chaos. Strangers, everything, all in our house. Um, it was crazy, but my life continued that way. And I woke up and I was running out of money.
Mm.
I had left my baby's dad by that point, and I was running out of money. I had my own apartment in this hot rod Camaro, and I just, I was still so full of ideas, but I was running out of money and I was unemployed because I had quit my job, and I decided to get sober, because from the time my son was born until I was 19 or 20 or 21, I can't even tell you how old I was when I went into my first rehab. But I went in myself, which is another story, because I had started smoking cocaine, freebasing cocaine,
Freebasing cocaine.
and freebasing cocaine. And along with a lot of alcohol, because always wanted to take the edge off and then wanted to chase that high. And so that was its own vortex straight down. And I woke up and decided I need help, I need to get off of this stuff. And I went into a rehab in the Valley, Los Angeles Valley, for 4 months. But I called this place and they're like, show up tomorrow. And I showed up and I was spun on cocaine and alcohol, and they're like, well, you can't come in, you know, don't drink or use for the rest of the day. Come back tomorrow. And I was driving like 50 miles to get to this rehab, right?
Mm.
And I show up the next day and I'm still spun and I'm still drunk, and the third or the fourth day, they finally said, okay, we'll just let you in. And I stayed there for 4 months. And I went into a sober living after that. So I was around Alcoholics Anonymous, and I seen that this program worked for many people, but I wasn't out of ideas, and I was sure it wouldn't work for me.
Okay, hold that thought. Let me recap on, because you said a whole bunch of stuff that made the amusement park in my head come alive. You know, and the clown isn't as dangerous as it used to be up here, but he still likes having fun. And what's fascinating is I can relate to so much that you said. With especially now, my own sister. Listen to me, because I'm telling on you. When you said that you stole the weed from your sister, that's a running joke in my family to this day. Because my little sister, yes, I'm ratting you out. My little sister stole my weed back in the day when I was 15. Now, that's been many, many moons ago. And I speak to her recently, and the very first thing I tell her is like, you stole my weed and I want my money with interest. And she just laughs at me, and it's like, I'm serious. I want my money back. I don't forget anything. Now that was kind of interesting that, another similarity that we have is that we both, because I lived alone since I was 14. I thought I had better ideas and things like that. And you lived on your own. The difference is you had enough wherewithal to go to work. I didn't. And that's really fascinating. And I love the fact that you said, something to the fact that, you could take the girl out of the ghetto, but you can't take the ghetto out of the girl.
Ghetto out of the
Hey, some of
girl.
us just even to this day, I mean, I'm the ghetto practitioner. I'm still ghetto fabulous. And I think it's really important as we go through our journey that we don't forget where we come from,
Right.
you know, but we don't have to live in it anymore. And so saying all that, and then that whole freebase code, the 80s were insane. And for those out here that are younger that didn't experience the 80s, thank you. Okay, you missed a whole lot. So anyway, moving forward. So now you're in treatment. You got a little taste of AA. You seen it work. Then what happened?
Well, I stayed abstinent for, I can't tell you how long, 7 or 8 years. And after I moved out of the sober living, which was about a year and a half or 2 years after after I'd gotten out of the rehab, and I had my own house, and this time I landed a job at the city of Santa Monica through a temporary agency, and got the job.
Mm-hmm.
And so here I was, paying the bills for city of Santa Monica, and I was abstinent from all drugs and alcohol at this point. But my thinking, having had not done anything that was suggested, because I just figured, you know what? I just need to be away from the drugs and alcohol.
Okay.
Okay.
What
And
is
so
that?
you separate me from those, and I'm going to do just fine. My decision making did not change.
Mm, okay. And because again, this is, thank you. I appreciate this. There's so much goodness going on here. You mentioned the word abstinence. Okay.
Yes.
Now, for our viewers, can you share with them the difference between abstinence and working a program?
Yes, I can. Having had the experience of just being abstinent, and that means I wasn't taking any substances, alcohol, or drugs for a long period of time. And my thinking did not change.
Mm.
My persona did not change. I did no effort to change the way I thought or presented myself. I just wasn't putting in drugs and alcohol.
Okay.
Fast forward to today, having had emerged myself in Alcoholics Anonymous, and and done the steps and did all of that soul searching, and found a power greater than myself, and realized how that power greater than myself was, whom I call God, was in my life my entire existence, but it wasn't until I did those steps and reflected on my life and how I treated people and all of that stuff, and learned to accept who I had been and gave myself room to become who I am.
Mm.
Through my higher power in the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I have gained a serenity that I call clean and sober.
Okay.
You
Okay.
know,
Okay.
and
And
that's the best way that I can explain it, because my brain thinks differently now that I've done the soul searching with the grace of my higher power. you know?
Okay, okay, and we're gonna. That's a great way to move us into this next little segment because as you so eloquently illustrated with us, is there's a huge difference between just not drinking and working a program. And the programs evolved working the steps, and somewhere in there, a higher power came and changed not just the way you feel, but the way you think. And there's an old cliche that I've heard around because I can self disclose. I'm in the program. I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and I know the 12 steps work. And there's a I heard in one of the rooms that what do you get when you sober up a drunken horse thief? Well, you get a sober horse thief, you know? And so the behavior still continues. And a lot of times, and I see it out there in what I do, a lot of times people will get sober, but yet do the same. People will get abstinence and they will do the same thing and wonder how come they're getting the same results. And
Right.
it's because we change the way we think, act, and do, and the results change. And you've shared that you've done that by working the steps. So let's jump on those steps. Okay, which is like I
Let's
totally
do it.
dig of now. There's rumors and probably factual that there's 12 of them. Okay, and I've also heard that it's really important that you work all 12 of them and that you work them in order. Now, I have heard and seen, people try to do step one, and all of a sudden they want to run around and make amends to everybody. It's like they want to argue it doesn't work. So tell us, what are some of the examples that you have learned by applying, and how do my listeners discover how to work the steps?
Well, when I first got here this time in 2006, I was an indigent woman. Despite the highs and lows in my life previous, through that abstinence and through my years of staying without a drink, I bought new cars and had a house and nice clothes and beautiful jewelry and all of this stuff, but I couldn't hang on to anything
Mm.
because my decision making was bad. That great job I had at the city of Santa Monica, wi- and let me mind you, I I quit school in 8th grade. So I had these two careers that would support me for the rest of my life, and I quit them both.
Mm.
Okay. Well, unbeknownst to me, when I quit working for the city of Santa Monica, uh, yeah, I couldn't find a job. Previous to that, I could get a job anytime, anywhere, blah, 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 blah. It didn't matter. I show up, I got hired because I believed I could do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to pass that off. Well, this recession had hit and people were losing their jobs, not getting them. So I ended up taking a job in a bar and I started bartending and I started making a lot of money bartending. I was cute and I was young and I was energetic and I was thinking like, well, obviously I wasn't thinking very well because I had been abstinent and I just figured, well, I could serve drinks without drinking drinks.
Mm.
And I was probably 6 months into bartending and I was driving to work in my new little pickup truck and the thought came through my head and it was this random and I was this unprepared. I don't feel like dealing with these drunks tonight. And there was a bar before the bar that I tended. And I pulled in there without even thinking about it. That one thought. And I walked in and I ordered a double shot of tequila and a Coors. And I took that shot of tequila and I sipped that pours. I probably left that much in the bottle. And I left and I went to my bar. But from that moment on, it was on and cracking,
Hmm.
you know, on and cracking. I had set off my disease in the most vicious way. It kept me for another 20 plus years. So I could fast forward to 2006 when I got to the program. I was indigent. I had nothing. I had no car. I had no bank account. I had no hope. And my thinking was I was just going to die on the streets. I had been absolutely homeless for 4 years.
Hmm.
In a out in the San Bernardino County. And it was just bad. It was just bad. Wandering the streets and in and out of jail and all of it was just horrible. Dealing drugs and I couldn't hold a job. I just getting high and staying drunk, my own mad scientist trying to find that even equal spot, not too drunk because that makes me pass out, not too high because that makes me not be able to think, and trying to find trying to find the middle ground there and never being able to find it. It was I would and there was never enough
Hmm. Okay,
for
so
all those
here
years.
here it is. You were successful. If you whatever you had the Midas touch. I mean, wherever you go, you got hired. Everything's great. You got careers. You're working for a really really good paying job, and all of a sudden you're abstinent, but your mind is still doing that. I guess we could say stinking thinking. And
Absolutely.
okay, and so your mind's doing that. You're like, okay, I'll just quit. And then all of a sudden say, okay, I'm going to work in the bar. Okay. And you're absent, no effective mental defense at all. And your best thinking said, let's just have a drink before I go to work because I'm tired of dealing with the drunks. And next thing you know, you're walking around the streets homeless. Now, at that point, what made you realize that it's time to throw the flag in?
Well, you know, I'm the type of addict alcoholic that goes until the wheels fall off. One night I checked into a motel, couldn't afford hotels by then. And I was fighting with the said boyfriend, and somebody called the police and they showed up, and they decided to go through my car. And what they found in that car, now we're talking about, this was 2006. Marijuana was still illegal, and bags of methamphetamine and scales and little baggies to break it up, all very illegal.
Hmm.
Well, he found all of that and paraphernalia and everything in my car. And he handcuffed me and put me in the back of his car, and he continued to go through my car to see what else he could find. Um, and I should mention that this particular officer was the head of the SMASH unit in San Bernardino. And the SMASH unit was the guys that sought out the drug dealers and busted them, put them in prison. So this particular officer's name was Ricky Hahn, and he was notorious throughout the lower echelons of society. And he, going through my car, he pulled me out of my car. He still had the said boyfriend handcuffed. He had a warrant. And he just looked me up and down, and he stared me straight in my eyes, and he said, if I were to give you one chance, what would you do with it? And my my anesthetized brain was thinking of all kinds of things. But certainly what was not going through my brain was I'll get sober.
Mm.
I'll try to get sober. But that's what came out of my mouth.
Hmm.
One more time, my higher power working in my life without my acknowledgement.
Hmm.
What came out of my mouth was nothing going on in my brain. And so he just stared me up and down, and I'm standing there handcuffed, and it just stared me up and down with the straightest, most stern face, and he said, "Right answer." He goes, "I'm going to give you one chance." He turned me around, took off the handcuffs, and he just stared at me and he said, "I never want to see you again." So about 4 days after that, I came out to Orange County and my journey began.
Okay. Okay. And it's
I was going to prison, a minimum of 5 years that night.
and instead your higher power just said, "Hey, you know what? This is what you're going to say." And it's really fascinating because there's another saying is we suddenly realize God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. You know,
Like,
and here it is, your saving grace. Next thing you know, you start your journey upward, and here you are 19 and a half years sober. Now, between that point and working the steps and being 19 and a half years sober, what was there any struggles? Was it just a life path, the easiness? Did you trudge the road of happy destiny, or did you get to skip gaily down the pathway of prosperity? Which one was it?
okay, I'm going to say right now, I'm truly happily trudging the road of happy destiny.
Okay.
But when I got here, I was broken. I was broken spiritually. It was a dark place. I was in a really dark place. I did not have any belief that I could not drink and drug. I had no belief.
Mhm.
But I really, truly didn't want to go to prison.
Mhm.
I had, I, I learned a lot hanging around the fringes of Alcoholics Anonymous in my early 20s. I was 42 years old when I got here later, you know.
Mhm.
And I had learned a lot. I kind of caught some stuff osmosis from hanging around the fringes, and so I still believe that Alcoholics Anonymous could work for everybody else, but probably not me. And so I came into the program with that belief. But I had the willingness to try something different for
Mhm.
once in my life, and I like to say that I was struck that night with that cop within a nanosecond that I needed to try something different, and I was struck with willingness to do it, and my journey began. Um, there's so many hands on my 19 and a half years of not putting poison in my body. There's so many hands on it. I got here, and again, I'm gonna stress I was broken in every aspect of being a human being. I was broken. I had no confidence. I had no integrity. I had no hope of doing anything but dying on the streets, an addict, alcoholic, and just another statistic.
Mhm.
Um, I got here and there were just so many caring women. I stuck with the women. I have to say that too, because the guys need to stick with the guys and the girls need to stick with the women. And I say girls because when we get here, we're pretty immature,
Wow. Okay.
and so I got a sponsor as suggested. She kind of chose me because I didn't know how to do any of that. I was so riddled with fear, I couldn't do anything in that indigent women's detox, which was Ashland House. But think of all the ugliness that I had done to others and how I disappointed and on and on and on. And so my head was full of negative thought. And I didn't know how to stop that. You know, there was a lady that came to a meeting inside of the the Ashland House. And she, after the meeting, she walked up to me. She must have just seen how scared I was because I was frightened. I didn't know what tomorrow looked like without drugs and alcohol. I just didn't, my mind could not conceive a day without it. And so, she just came and she sat down next to me. It's a little old lady. I don't even know her name. I could picture her face right now because she put her arm around me and she said, "Sweetheart," she goes, "Look at it. Look at it like a coin. One side is faith and the other side is fear, and you get the choice." You know? And that made sense to me. That made a lot of sense to me. Now I stayed with that fear of I couldn't do it for a long time. That at one point that shoe was going to drop and I was going to pick up again. And so I went through that indigent women's detox, and I wasn't far enough from my last drink. Okay. I got out in 30 days. They took me to another establishment for indigent people in Dana Point called the Friendship Fellowship or something. And when we pulled up in the van in that, I seen a bar, a Jack in the Box, and kitty corner, a liquor store. And I called my friend and I said, "I can't do that. I can't stay here." I was so uncomfortable in my own skin. I couldn't stay there. I would have been in that bar first.
Mm.
You know, as soon as they drove off, I'm sure I would have jumped into that bar. And so I called my friend and he drove from Westminster out to Dana Point and picked me up. He had been working a program for about 3.5 years at this point. So he took me back to his apartment and he would leave me his phone and he's like, "Find some place to go," and bloody, but you got to find some place. You can't stay here, but you got to find some place to go. And so I started calling Lynn House, and I called Lynn House for 2 or 3 weeks, and they were full, and they were full, and they were full. And finally, a volunteer said, "Yes, we have a bed. How long have you not drank?" And by this time, it was maybe, see, July 8th was when I went into Ashland, and it was the 21st of August that I went into Lynn House.
Mm.
So however many days that is, I've never sat and counted them, but about a month and a half. And she goes, "Oh, you've been sober far too long
Yeah.
to come here." And I went, "Will you have a bed?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Well, I could fix that sober thing." And I went into my friend's bedroom. I stole a bunch of change out of his change drawer. I walked down to the liquor store. I bought a pint of vodka and a pack of cigarettes. I downed that pint of vodka and I called back and I said, "I'm no longer sober. Can I take that bed?" And they let me in. Now, through that program, I was put in touch with a, a program called Spin out here, and that's an acronym for serving people in need. And that organization put me into a sober living. paid my rent for 6 months on my promise to find a job. Bought me a bus pass, gave me food, and those were the things I needed. Those were the things I needed to maybe move forward, but I was still scared that I couldn't do it. So it was after I got into that sober living, I got a sponsor. She started picking me up at 6 o'clock every morning. She did this for 4 solid years. Okay. Picked me up at 6 o'clock, 7 days a week, took me to an early AM meeting, had me set up the chairs in this church and make the coffee. Afterwards, I cleaned them up, cleaned it all up, put the chairs back where they belong, cleaned up the coffee. She took me back home. I took my shower. I got on the bus and I went to work.
Okay. And so here we are at 4 years of sobriety, and you're at 19 now, and we're bringing this plane to a landing. Okay. What's your general week like now that you're sober for 19 years? What are you doing out there?
What am I doing out there? Well, I sponsor several women. Okay. So, I do that. I do that with a lot of great joy because so many women, and especially my sponsor, spent so much time, their time, which I have now realized is my most valuable commodity, is my time, my space, my energy. So I a woman asked me to sponsor her, and I never tell her no. Most of them do the 1, 2, 3, start the 4th, drink a 5th, and I never see or hear from them again. There's been hundreds of those. I've had, in 19 years, I have gotten one person completely through the steps. But I'll tell you what those hundreds and hundreds of other women have done for me. Going through 1, 2, and 3 with them, and they do the most solid 1, 2, and 3s, in my opinion, and get to that 4th and don't want to look inside because that's a really hard job. That was really tough. My experience with step 4 was when I did step 5, my sponsor looked at me and she goes, "You're holding on to something. We're going to do this again."
Yeah.
And she did that 4 or 5 times. And finally, I felt a sense of freedom, a sense of, I don't know. There was a lot of trauma in my childhood and stuff, and I wasn't even aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
I just figured that was life,
Yeah.
and it was normal.
And what's really
So
fascinating?
I sponsor women. I go to a minimum of 3 meetings every week. And there's a reason for that. Because the minimum 3 is too close to 2. And 2 is too close to 1. And 1 is too close to none. And the fellowship is very, very important for me to give back what has so freely been given to me.
Okay. And
So
so,
I stayed very active in Alcoholics Anonymous, and now for the last couple of years, Narcotics Anonymous as well.
okay, so being involved, going to meetings, sponsoring people, all of that stuff, working through the steps, even if it's just taking somebody up to 3 steps, that magical formula or that mixture somehow has given you 19 and a half years. And
That magical formula has given me 19 and a half years because I'm in the habit of doing 1, 2, and 3 every single morning.
okay, and so for those out there, because we're gonna land the plane a little bit, but for those out there looking for a sponsor, and those out there that are sponsoring, what would you say to those 2 different groups?
I would say to the sponsee, to the person looking for the sponsor, to try and listen in the meetings, and when they hear a man or a woman tell a bit about their story, to speak to them after the meeting and maybe ask that person somebody that they can relate to sponsor them. To the sponsor, I would say never fire a sponsee.
Okay. And those are some wise words, and thank you for your input. Ladies and gentlemen, we had the pleasure of taking a walk with Miss Jessie C, sharing her experience, strength, and hope with all of us out here on Care is Everywhere. I enjoy meeting people, East Coast, West Coast, it doesn't matter. Male, female, it doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is we do recover. We do.
Me too.
No matter where you come from, you can get there, but it's going to take work. And so for you folks out there listening today, I hope that you grab some nuggets, some tidbits, some strong suggestions on how to do this thing, because you're not alone. And again, you can come from being at a hopeless state to a part where you can be of help to those individuals who is walking that same path. So until the next time, it's me, Jessie. Thank you again. Thank you. And I'm going to wrap it up. This is the Ghetto Practitioner, folks, a.k.a. Anthony Brown. To switch it around, is Anthony Brown, a.k.a. Ghetto Practitioner. Or put it together, you can call it Ghetto Anthony Practicing. However you want to mix that match, or max that image, or however you want to put it, I'm happy to be with you today. And until the next time, I will see you all later.